Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're going to take a massive pivot and completely shift how you view something. Well, something you probably never ever want to think about. I'm talking about compliance. Now, wait, do not tune out. I promise you, we are about to take compliance and flip it from that boring, bureaucratic headache you've always pictured into literally the high octane hidden engine of modern finance. We've got some incredible insights to walk through today that'll totally change your perspective on how the global banking system is being quietly rewired right from the inside out.
Because think about it. We're all so used to hyping up the latest, flashiest consumer fintech app, right? The ones with the sleek, neon interfaces and the massive Super Bowl commercials. But what if we've been looking in the completely wrong place? What if the actual titans of the next decade, the most valuable companies, aren't consumer brands at all? Because the really smart capital, it's quietly flowing away from the consumer layer and just pouring into the underlying plumbing of the financial world. And there's a very specific, undeniable reason for that.
Okay, let's dive into this. See, for decades, traditional financial institutions have looked at regulation completely upside down. They viewed it as this annoying external pressure, a penalty box, basically just a massive cost center to minimize, right? But the absolute smartest institutions right now, they understand the exact opposite. Compliance isn't some hurdle you just awkwardly jump over anymore. Compliance is literally becoming the business itself. And I don't mean in a bureaucratic paper-pushing way, but as pure infrastructure. The banks and fintechs that are actually going to win the next decade aren't just competing on who has the lowest fees. No way. They're turning regulatory pressure into their ultimate competitive advantage by building the fastest, smartest trust architecture in the world.
Which brings us to our first major paradigm shift happening right beneath the surface. Section 1. The hidden banking transition, moving from institutions to infrastructure.
Now, what's really interesting about this transition is that in the digital age, your underlying architecture actually compounds way faster than your sheer size or scale. Like, historically, we had this institution-centric finance model. A bank was this giant monolith. It controlled absolutely everything internally. Onboarding, payments, ledgers, risk, identity verification, the whole shebang. Everything lives safely inside a walled garden. But today, we're moving to infrastructure-centric finance. The modern ecosystem is totally fragmented into these hyper-specialized, API-driven layers. Payments are modular, underwriting is purely algorithmic, fraud detection is natively powered by AI. So the winners aren't just taking their clunky old monolithic systems and slopping a digital interface on them. Actually, scratch that. They are entirely redesigning their operations around interoperability and automated embedded trust.
And that perfectly tees up Section 2, the dangerous speed gap, linear ops versus exponential finance. So, making the shift we just talked about, it's not just a nice-to-have cosmetic upgrade. It is an absolute survival imperative. Why? Because legacy compliance systems, which, remember, were built for a much slower analog economy, are literally breaking down under the weight of modern digital velocity. Just look at the stark contrast here between legacy assumptions and modern reality. Those old-school anti-money laundering and KYC systems, they assumed banking was geographically localized, identity was highly centralized, and settlement cycles, well, they were delayed by days. Basically, they relied on the slow-moving world where human reviewers had plenty of time to catch up and sip their coffee. Now look at the modern reality on the right. We've got instant payments, cross-border digital commerce, synthetic identities, and AI-generated fraud happening in milliseconds. The real-time movement of capital today completely shatters every single assumption those legacy systems were built on. Because modern finance behaves so dynamically, having static oversight is just a total recipe for disaster. We're facing this incredibly dangerous asymmetrically right now. Think about it. Financial innovation and financial crime are both moving at an exponential pace, but regulatory operations, they're stuck trudging along at a linear pace. That speed gap creates massive vulnerabilities, sure, but it also creates an unbelievable opportunity. The institutions that can actually close this gap, that can match the blistering speed of modern finance with truly dynamic oversight, are going to gain a disproportionate, massive strategic advantage over everyone else.
Moving right along to Section 3, Trust as Strategic Leverage, the New Economics.
See, the very nature of competition in the financial sector is fundamentally changing. The focus is rapidly shifting away from traditional metrics and toward what we can basically call trust throughput. Trust is no longer just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It is a hardcore operational metric.
Historically, trust was entirely reputational. It was built up over decades, it was highly subjective, and verifying it was this painfully slow manual process. Think of the old-timey bank manager who literally knew your whole family. But today, trust is computational. It's calculated in real time, it's infinitely scalable, and it relies heavily on machine learning, behavioral analytics, and cryptographic identity. So the crucial point here is that trust is being dynamically computed on the fly. And when trust becomes scalable like that, it becomes an incredibly powerful form of economic leverage.
If you really want to grasp the sheer magnitude of this shift, and specifically the impact of AI on compliance, think back to what cloud computing did to the software industry. Before the cloud, scaling your software meant buying expensive physical servers, dealing with massive, headache-inducing operational complexity, and enduring these incredibly slow deployment cycles. The cloud came along and just abstracted all that complexity away. Well, AI-native compliance systems are doing the exact same thing for financial risk operations. They're abstracting away those manual bottlenecks. But the real magic here isn't just, replacing humans with basic automation. It's all about compression. Look at what AI actually compresses here. Review time, investigation cycles, onboarding friction, analyst workload, fraud detection latency, reporting delays. By drastically shrinking all of these elements, AI fundamentally rewires the unit economics of a bank. An institution equipped with intelligent compliance infrastructure can scale their customer base so much faster, dramatically reduce false positives, and significantly lower their regulatory exposure, all without needing to hire an army of thousands of manual human reviewers. It's a total game changer.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Building Compliance Data Moats, the Intelligence Ecosystem.
When you start processing all of this data at massive scale, every single compliance check stops being just an annoying regulatory checkbox and actually becomes proprietary intelligence. We're talking about building massive, unbreachable compliance data moats. Here's how this AI flywheel actually works in practice. Step 1, a routine transaction or identity check occurs. Step 2, that specific check generates a unique behavioral signal. Step 3, over time, millions of these signals build an incredibly deep proprietary risk dataset. And then, step 4, that massive dataset fuels far superior fraud detection and underwriting models, which then feeds right back into step 1. It's an AI flywheel effect spinning right inside the compliance department itself. The smartest firms aren't just out there selling checking accounts anymore, they're building intelligence ecosystems that their competitors simply can't replicate because they just don't have the data history. And hey, here's a pretty surprising fact about what's actually forcing this whole evolution into overdrive right now. Stablecoins and blockchain technology. Yeah, really. Because blockchain transactions settle instantly, they completely break that old model where reconciliation and investigations happened, days later. Stablecoins are actually applying massive, relentless pressure for real-time compliance, programmable oversight, and embedded reporting. So, ironically enough, this decentralized crypto-native tech is forcing regulators and traditional banks to modernize their compliance infrastructure way faster than anyone ever anticipated. Now, let's look ahead to our final section. Section 5, the autonomous compliance future. This whole dynamic is exactly why sophisticated institutional investors are quietly pouring absolute billions into regulatory tech infrastructure rather than, say, the next flashy consumer budgeting app. They see the operational model of the future taking shape right in front of us. We define autonomous compliance as a future operational model where human experts act as risk architects and intelligence analysts who supervise continuous dynamic AI compliance agents. Now, to be totally clear, this does not eliminate human oversight, not at all, but it radically changes the operational scale. Instead of a human manually reviewing one suspicious transaction at a time, the human is supervising an AI agent that is continuously monitoring millions of transactions, adapting its own risk models on the fly, and prepping the regulatory paperwork automatically. Humans become the master architects of the system, not just the cogs grinding inside it. So for the banks and fintechs out there that actually want to dominate this transition, the playbook is pretty crystal clear. First, you have to prioritize an API-native modular architecture so you can adapt quickly. Second, you need to move away from periodic manual checks and embrace continuous real-time compliance. Third, you must deploy AI-assisted decision layers because manual reviews simply cannot scale to meet modern digital demand. And finally, you absolutely have to integrate portable digital identity systems to just kill that onboarding friction. Bottom line, trust optimization has to be treated as your core growth infrastructure. When you finally put all of these pieces together, the entire paradigm totally flips. In the world of programmable finance, trust becomes infinitely scalable. Regulation transforms from a manual chore into executable code.
intelligence becomes highly operational, and ultimately, compliance stops being a burden and becomes your absolute greatest strategic leverage.
The main takeaway here is just incredibly powerful. The future of banking isn't just going to be digital. I mean, digital is already the baseline, right? The real winners of the next decade will be the institutions that are intelligently regulated by design. They're the ones actively building systems where compliance is natively woven right into the very fabric of their technology, not just bolted on as an afterthought to keep the lawyers happy.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on today. Whether you're building a fintech startup, investing in the markets, or just trying to understand where the global economy is heading, ask yourself, are you treating compliance as a cost to minimize or as infrastructure to optimize? The way you answer that question might just dictate exactly who wins and who loses in this next era of finance. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll catch you next time.